The views and opinions expressed on this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the network, producers, advertisers, or hosts, and belong solely to those who make them. Truth Frequency is a non-biased and non-partisan platform committed to presenting all aspects of the truth and allowing you, the listener, to decide for yourself.
31 seconds, and we're gone for auto sequence start.
This is David Icke, and you're tapped into the Truth Frequency with Chris and Cherie.
It's called being in the zone. It's called, being lucky. It's called having everything go your way.
When you deal with computers, you deal with ones and zeros. And the only way that you can make a computer more powerful is to expand the consciousness of the computer.
Well, it's something bigger than ourselves, and that's got to be said.
It has to do with the self-image that people have.
Just kind of your ego being swept aside, or being kind of stomped on, or being swatted like a fly.
It really is and truly happening at a societal level.
It is being able to take what feels like ordinary human energy and mastering extraordinary power, even with a single person in a society with this kind of power. Call it the X factor.
And guess what, guys? Here we are.
From the Gateway to the Rockies, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the country and around the world. This is Chris Gio, and you are tapped into the Truth Frequency, special edition of Truth Frequency, I meant to say. And it is September 27, 2011. We have a jam-packed show for you today. Joining me, as always, is my lovely chipmunk, twin flame, and co-host, Cherie.
Good evening, everybody.
In the first half hour, we're going to have our good friend, Chris Bogner. He is a medical doctor. We're going to break down some of these things that are going on with Elenin and also take a look at everything going on in the world from a medical perspective. Now, in about 30 minutes, we're going to be joined by Brooks Agnew, special last-minute announcements for the subscribers out there, because it's you guys that make it possible. And this is the only reason that we're able to do these special broadcasts is because of you guys, and we thank you from the bottom of our heart for this love and support that you send our way. So Brooks will be joining us for an hour, here in about half an hour, to give us an update on Elenin. He's got some new information and also some of these possibilities. Today was supposed to be one of these big alignment dates, and I don't know. Doesn't look like anything happened today. But you know what? I heard these dates go from you got to mute your mic when I'm talking. Otherwise, we get that weird talk back. Yeah, but first data that I came across, we're going to have the major alignment date on November 5th, and then it changed to November 9th, and now all of a sudden it changed to September 27th. So I don't know. I know that JPL is lying to us. So who knows where this comet is? Even if it even is a comet, I mean, there's a good possibility too that this thing is going to expand to the size of the sun. People are saying that it's made out of hydrogen cyanide. There's a lot of information, misinformation, and disinformation out there, but I figured, hey, let's cover this topic, and then we'll get into the Nag Hammadi texts and the Planetary Tantra and the Myth of Sophia with John Lamb Lash. And Christopher Everard will co-host the broadcast with us. He'll be riding shotgun, so that's going to be really interesting to see or to hear. I'm sorry, I've got 10 different things here in front of me that I'm trying to get taken care of. So anyways, let's get to a quick break, and we'll be right back with Chris Bogner. And I think I'll run this one for the break because this is kind of Elenin. If you really listen to the words of this song, you can really tell it's really about the black hole sun. So here you go. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth Frequency special broadcast for all of the subscribers out there. And you know what, when I heard this song, I really didn't make the connection until I spoke with Lucas, who's going to be on the show this Saturday. And he said, man, you got to listen to Holy Diver, listen to Rainbow in the Dark, listen to all of those old heavy metal songs that they called people Satanists. And he says, in actuality, what they're really doing is talking about the black hole sun. And, you know, I don't know if it's stretching it a little too much, but there's some really interesting lyrics here. Between the velvet lies, there's a truth that's hard as steel. The vision never dies. Life's a never-ending wheel. The wheel of life, of course, the time loop going around and around. You're the star of the masquerade. No need to look so afraid. Jump on the tiger. You can feel its heart, but you know he's mean. Some light can never be seen. He said something about a tiger earlier, though. Here it is. You can see his stripes, but you know he's clean. Well, if a tiger without his stripes, what is that? That's a lion. And this thing is supposed to come from Leo. So, I don't know, maybe that's stretching it a little bit too much, but it's a real interesting interpretation when you really think about it. But anyways, without any further delay, let's go to our good friend and resident doctor, Chris Bogner. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Doing good, doing good.
I'm actually not a resident anymore, but that's fine. No difference.
Okay.
Well, you share something in common with Ron Paul, though. You're both OBGYNs, and you're both awake.
That's right. That's why everybody should vote for him. I think he has good knowledge about, he's a deep thinker.
Well, you're absolutely right. And not only that, but you are the people that bring life into this world, and that's something that people need to respect. I saw Mitt Romney take Ron Paul by the hand. Rick Perry, not Mitt Romney, and take Ron Paul by the hand and start sticking his finger in the face. And I was like, I don't care what problems you have. The man is 80 years old. He's brought so much life into the world. You're going to talk to him like that? You're going to disrespect him like that? So anyway, I don't really agree too much with Ron Paul. I agree with a lot of what he says, but what he does behind the curtains is a little bit, questionable. But regardless, whatever happened to respecting our elders? That's where it all comes from.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Well, so you guys discussing Elenin tonight in most part, I heard. So I think that's really interesting. What do you guys think about that? I mean, nothing has happened yet, but I think it's not over yet. I mean, if you look at some of these things we've collected over the last couple of days, it's pretty staggering.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, even if you look at this from any angle and you say, okay, nothing happened on September 27th. Well, if something was really going to happen, wouldn't they change the dates around? Wouldn't they cover their tracks? A weird thing that we discovered today was Obama has a completely clear schedule from here until the end of time.
We saw that today. You can actually see that on the whitehouse.gov.
Whitehouse.gov, and his schedule's just completely up in the air after today.
Oh, you were the one that sent us that, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, no, I want to give credit where credit is due, definitely.
No, it's all the information is from somewhere in the internet, so credit to someone out there, but credit to you guys, bringing all that together in one picture. So that's what's important, I think. So.
Yeah.
Well, apparently we've had some other alignments today, not just Elenin. We've also had one called 2000 SP43. It's all three of these aren't very big, so no freaking out. But we did have 3 asteroids/comets that did come very close to the Earth, and I don't think they had anything to do with anything, but it just goes to show you we're getting almost hit with asteroids almost every day.
Well, the problem is that it's not asteroids or comets that we have to worry about. What we have to worry about is what if this thing is not a comet? What if it's not an asteroid? That's what I'm keeping an eye on. I mean, the possibility of an asteroid hitting us and causing any kind of major extinction level event, I think is very, very small. Now, we could get hit by an asteroid that causes a nuclear type explosion like Hiroshima or something. That's what they're talking about in 2036, I think it is, with the comet Apophis. But anyways, I'm ranting here. Chris, tell us, what have you decoded so far? I know you've been really into David Wilcox's work and other ideas about how the universe works and on all of this. So what does Elenin mean to you, and what do you foresee coming?
Well, my question was, what is really the golden age that we're all looking for? And, and thinking about, what could make this life really much better. I was thinking, it's pretty much what could make this life perfect for me is, just going anywhere at any time to any time, which would mean pretty much, time travel, which you could just go into any time that has ever existed or ever will be, just with the snap of a finger. So, along with that, teleportation, levitation, all these things, that seem so absurd. That for me, that's my definition of the golden age, which is simply an upgrade in our consciousness, and we all unified with all the experiences that ever happened.
Well, and that would include an upgrade in our DNA as well, wouldn't it?
Right, and that's exactly what I'm trying to talk about. And to understand the upgrade in the DNA, you really need to look at you need to look as deep as we can, and that, in my opinion, is going down to the atom, right? And if you look at the atom, there was a researcher, his name was Dr. Moon, and he looked at the atom, and what he found in the atom is the platonic solids. And do you know about the platonic solids?
No. I do, yes, but explain it for the audience.
Well, the platonic solids are geometric alignments, and there's 5 of them, and there's the icosahedron, the dodecahedron, the tetrahedron, the cube, and I'm missing one, but regardless, those are the things, and those geometric structures is what he found in the atoms. And the significance of this is that let me find my notes here. The significance is that while he was looking at these atoms, different atoms had different points. Hold on. For example, he saw the shell in the nucleus, and it had 8 protons, and he found then that this is the atom that ultimately codes for oxygen, which is 62% of all atoms in the Earth's crust. And for example, icosahedron corresponded to iron, which is in the crust of the Earth and is responsible for the strong magnetic fields. But then, if you go and look at more biological life, you have to really go into the genetic code, and a genetic code, to really understand it, it's really simple. What it is, it's a nucleotide. It's basically what the genetic code is. It's nucleotides. Mm-hmm. And there's 4 nucleotides that are out there, and a combination of 3 of those in a row is necessary to code for an amino acid. And that's what genes are. So genes basically code for protein, and proteins, all they are is assemblies of amino acids. And we have 20 standard amino acids which are used by living cells to encode for proteins. And proteins are, as you know, are everything. Proteins can be enzymes, they can be, forming into molecules, which will form into cells, all different kinds of things. So a code of 3 of those nucleotides could code for a maximum of 64 amino acids. Mm-hmm. Do you understand that? So you have 4 nucleotides, but a code of 3 of them can form a maximum of 64 amino acids. So, and Watson and Crick actually laid this down in a two-dimensional sheet. So they're giving you all the possible amino acid results on one paper. And all these results are the building blocks for protein synthesis. If you, however, lay this code out instead of a two-dimensional sheet, you lay this code out in a dodecahedron, you will find that the double helix form of DNA is a sequence of dodecahedrons. That means that we can code for pretty much anything we like, but currently we're only using 20 of those amino acids. So what about all the other codes in our DNA? Why are we not using them? There's 44 codes that we are not coding for.
Right.
So, do you know somatics, when we have fluid that has isotones in it, that these isotones in the fluid, they don't fall with gravity, but they just float in the fluid.
Right.
And then when you shoot a vibration through it, the higher the vibration, the more complex the patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think of this non-magnetic field, which we can't pick up with any, nowadays detectors. That's why nobody's talking about it. But for example, Wilcock is, and he wasn't actually the first one, because there's different names for that, such as the ether, the torsion field, the source field, as he calls it in his new book. And the source field or torsion field, he explains this as a fluid-like and geometry which naturally occurs, when fluid is pulsated with that torsion field, we basically shape our reality. Like pyramids and other funnel-shaped structures who catch this flow of the torsion field generate some sort of coherence in a given area, which creates increasingly refined geometric patterns. And thus, some people say, and that's, what they did in Egypt and what they did with the experiments in the pyramids in Russia, it heals biological life. And they even used some of these stones that, they recreated the pyramids in Russia and used some of those stones to put into prisons, and they showed that, the inmates were much more peaceful, for example. And it also, heals the currents in the oceans and in the atmosphere. But what I'm getting to is that the Mayan calendar operates in 9 distinct levels of waves. And the 9th wave, which is coinciding with the end of the Mayan calendar, occurs, according to Kalman, on October 28th. And he believes that the world will enter a new age based on expanding unity consciousness. Now, what I found really interesting is that Richard Hoagland discovered the mysterious tetrahedral geometry on all the planets. Basically, on the Sun, he found that sunspot patterns do not go above 19.5 degrees. On Mars, he found that there's the Olympus Mons volcano, which is 3 times higher than Mount Everest. On Venus, he found 2 volcanoes at 19.5 inches. On the Earth, there's the Hawaiian Islands.
Right. That seems to be like the pressure points of the planets.
Right, and they all correspond to this tetrahedral geometry. If you put a pyramid-like structure through that planet, you find that one of those edges is at 19.5 degrees. That's all it means with the 19.5.
Right.
So, what I'm saying is that with all the platonic solids, the 5 geometric structures that you have, all of them you can turn inside out, meaning you turn them inside out in a different form of geometry forms, except the tetrahedron. If you put that, tetrahedron, all it is, it's a 4-shaped structure, which is basically a pyramid. I mean, the pyramid that sits in Egypt, for example, I'm sorry, it's 5-sided. The pyramid that sits in Egypt is 5-sided. It's the 5th side is just laying on the ground.
Right.
And that's a tetrahedron.
Yes.
Now, Richard Hoagland, well, basically not him, but what happened is that on August 19th, the Stereo B satellite from NASA caught a very interesting event, and he picked up on that. So he didn't come up with this; he just found that specifically. And what happened is that there was some sort of interaction of the gas coma of the comet Elenin.
Yes.
And there was a coronal mass ejection from the sun, and that exactly at that point when that happened, they took a picture, and they could clearly see how the structure of Elenin actually looks like. And you could see the dynamics and the trajectory trail of that and all that.
Now, I heard that this thing was made out of hydrogen cyanide. Is that true?
I'm not sure about the composition of it, but the more important part is that he found that the structure looks like a tetrahedron. And that was pretty staggering, because if you come up with all this other stuff that we were talking about the tetrahedron, that, basically, that this could be the source field, basically, which was explained by Wilcox. That means that the tetrahedron force of Elenin could potentially catapult us into time-space, where we will experience time as being three-dimensional. That's what I believe will happen, and we basically could go wherever we want, whenever we want to, whenever we want. It's almost like we can enjoy all the human experiences at our fingertip, almost being like a reward for bearing with all the previous 8 cycles of the main line. Shouldn't we see some type of like crescendo that's leading up to this, rather than it being an event that happens overnight? Well, that's where the guessing comes in, I guess. I think it is a crescendo already. I mean, I can feel that something is going to happen myself so strongly, and many other people do as well. I'm sure you guys do. We just don't know how exactly it's going to play out. But yeah, I guess that is true. We are seeing a global shift in consciousness for sure. More people are becoming aware of who they are, their environment. Some people are becoming more and more telepathic, intuitive. I know that I am. I'm thinking of what Cherie's thinking a lot of the times. I can predict when phone calls are about to come in, who's calling, things like that. And it's just intuition is starting to grow. So maybe you're absolutely right. We are seeing it now. Yes. I just, still waiting for me to be able to, just go buy a ticket here and fly with my mind to a different dimension, check it out, and come back. But maybe that sounds a little weird. No, I'm right there with you. Let me ask you this: as a medical doctor, do you see any changes in people who you see? To be honest with you, I think I don't actually. I feel like I'm falling deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. Maybe I'm just becoming more crazy, but I don't see it in people. And there was one person I heard talking before, I can't remember the name, but who said, the universe is fair. If you ask for answers, you'll get them, but if you don't ask, you won't. So many people don't want to know, and I'm not sure what's going to happen to those people, but, if they get reincarnated and have to experience it again or not, and get reincarnated with the new upgraded DNA, I don't know. But I don't see any difference in most people. I do see more people because I guess I look for them. You know what I'm saying? Like truth frequency or... Well, I've noticed that too. I mean, we do tend to kind of gravitate towards each other. Absolutely. But you know how they say that 7,000 people who meditated reduced terrorism on the planet by 75%. So it doesn't mean that the whole world needs to wake up. It's an exponential phenomenon that's explained by others that could explain it much better than me. But
your positive energy is about 10,000 times as strong as a negative person's energy.
That's exactly right. So not everybody needs to be woken up. I think that's what the Esoteric Agenda documentary pointed out so well, is that not everybody needs to be awoken, just you. If just you awakes, that's a lot for humanity. For Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, we had William Whitecrow on the broadcast the day before Hurricane Irene, and we had tens of thousands of people meditating on making it dissipate back into the sea. It happened the very next day. That's exactly what... As a matter of fact, within a couple of hours of the broadcast ending, it started to dissipate. Now, is that a coincidence? Was it going to do that on its own? Who knows? But I know that we put the energy out there, and what we focused on actually happened. So... I remember that. Yeah. That was pretty cool. Yeah, take it for what it's worth. Brooks is sending me a message saying that he has to take off a little bit early, so we're going to bring him on a little bit earlier. In the next couple of minutes, is there anything you want to wrap it up with? No, I'm pretty excited to hear the rest of the show. All I can say is I really, truly recommend that book from Wilcox, The Source Field Investigation, no matter, about how goofy Wilcox acts when you see him live, or the book is amazing. It's very little of his personal opinion in that book, and mostly he's collecting research from so many different sources and brings it together and exactly what he feels. And it's truly amazing to find out the mechanics of the ether works. And And from that point, it's just a popcorn show of, how is it going to play out. And no matter how it's going to play out, it doesn't really matter, because you know that you're part of one unity, and there's only eternity. You can't really die. So if a comet hits the Earth, who cares? You're going to be upgraded into the next density automatically. So that's the beauty of that, understanding the mechanics of life through that book, and then going from there, really laughing at all the stuff that's happening, like economic collapse, wars. It's concerning, but there's black and there's white. It's all part of unity. There's good and there's bad. There's up and there's down, but it doesn't mean in what I'm saying that good is better than bad or bad is better than good,
Right.
It's all unity, so it's all part of it. So we just have to enjoy each part as an experience.
I completely agree. I hate to cut the time short like this. I'd like to get you on our Saturday show for a full hour in the beginning of one of the shows, so I'll get with you after the show or sometime tomorrow and set that up if that's good for you.
Sounds good.
Excellent. We appreciate you
coming on.
Thanks
for having me on.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We look forward to speaking to you again. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Chris Bogner, good friend of ours, supporter of the show as well, and
Great guy.
We can't thank him enough. Absolutely. We'll be right back with Brooks Agnew. I'll get him on the line. We'll see you in just a minute.
En el peu de Santanya pareix que sent picarols suaus si es mou sa manada.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a special presentation of Truth Frequency this September 27, 2011. Special thanks to Christopher Bogner, who joined us in the first half hour. Joining us is the one and only Brooks Agnew, and maybe he can explain why the black hole sun hasn't come yet. Now, it's September 27th, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting for it to come. And, it's funny because my data first showed that we're supposed to have this big alignment on November 5th. And then JPL changed it to November 9th, and then now it changed to September 27th. So maybe Brooks can shed some light on the subject, and maybe even tell us maybe the black hole sun isn't coming. Maybe it's something else. So Brooks, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Chris. Good to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on last minute like this. Everybody's wondering what happened. We looked at Obama's schedule. He is completely open until the end of time after today. We looked on White House, and he doesn't have anything on his schedule. So everybody was getting a little worried there, but I don't think there's anything to worry about, is there?
No, I don't think Obama needs to make any long-term plans.
Oh. Why would you say that?
Well, I think he's, pretty much going to be traveling on his pension in about a year.
Ah, yeah, that is true. That is true. It doesn't look too good for him. But, it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes. So
you got that right.
If the voting machines like him, then we're going to get him again.
Ron Paul said something very interesting today. He said Obama plans on spending $1 billion on running for president. And Ron Paul said, you don't need $1 billion if you're right.
Very true. You're absolutely right. You just need integrity. That's it. Ron Paul does have the integrity to a certain point. I don't know. Some of the things that he did with his finances last campaign I wasn't too pleased with. When in New Hampshire, he just kind of gave up the fight. And there were people coming out and saying, hey, wait a minute, I voted for Ron Paul. My vote didn't get counted. And then they turn around and say, excuse me, we forgot to count these 12 votes here that were for Ron Paul. And he didn't fight. He didn't, call for a recount, nothing at all.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, watching what's going on. I think that when you see the mainstream press literally skip over his name, even though he comes in second or comes in third, nobody out here believes the press anymore. They see the game. They see right through it. And really, I think in the last 10 years, we've really had a metamorphosis with the human race. The net, the web, I don't even want to call it the internet because it has such a stigma about it. It's become a part of our neurology for this nation, or for the whole world. And it's accelerating the metamorphosis of the human race. We're actually evolving as a race because we're able to communicate on a real-time basis. But now we've got two different worlds of consciousness. We have the old tried and true talking heads who are paid $5, $10, $15 million a year to look good on TV and gain our trust 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the news. And then we have the net, where we have now a candidate, Ron Paul, who has very effectively put together not just a grassroots movement, he's put together an entire subculture underneath the mainstream media, and it may be bigger than the mainstream media.
Quite possibly. I mean, I have seen that. Let's say first place, so-and-so, third place, so-and-so, fourth place, and they expect people not even to notice. They're like, oh, who's second place? Oh, we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. and he doesn't get second place by a big margin. He gets second place by a very small margin, but third place is like 1,000 points behind him. But they'll mention third place.
I've gotten to the point, though, to where, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, it's all just smoke and mirrors. It's all entertainment. It's bread and circuses. All these elections and debates and everything like that, because the outcome's going to be whoever they want it to be.
Well, even if it isn't, even if we're ultimately entertained and we do get a libertarian in the White House, it isn't the elected officials that run the government anyway. It's the bureaucracies.
Right.
It's the EPA. It's the Department of Education. It's the Department of Energy. Those are the ones that are going through the budget. Those are the ones that really write the rules and laws. That's why Congress can't keep up, because the EPA is writing something like 200 regulations a month. Well, there's only 435 elected officials up there. There are like 430,000 bureaucrats. There's no way they can keep up. We have lost control of our government. We don't have a government anymore. We are being run by a loose coalition of bureaucracies that write their own paychecks on our backs.
Well, it was a corporate coup is what it was. And we saw it over and over again with the banksters just overthrowing the government, threatening them that there's going to be martial law on the streets if they don't do this and they don't do that. So we're run by a corporation. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And they're not American corporations either. They're global, multi-billion-dollar corporations, and they are fleecing the American taxpayer.
I do have to ask you, though. We have, I don't know if you're familiar with the gentleman named Lucas. He'll be on the show on Saturday, but he did a presentation called The Destroyer Star. And he broke down from beginning to end, from the 70s, everything that has happened, the economic crisis, the trillions of dollars disappearing, the bunkers that they're building underneath Denver International Airport and all over the world for that matter. And he broke it down and tied it all into some coming catastrophe. And what he theorizes that it's some kind of brown dwarf star coming in. And he doesn't take it from any recent research. He looks at all the cave paintings and the ancient tales and things like that. Do you think that's possible, that they are preparing for a big catastrophic event?
Oh, it's not only possible, it's irrefutable. Now, I don't know exactly what event they're preparing for, because they're not sharing all the information they know with us. But I can tell you that many, many trillions of dollars have been spent building these underground bases. I didn't believe it at first. I really didn't. I didn't want to be a conspiracy theorist. But I started reading the press for myself. Russia's building 5,000 more bunkers. Switzerland is completely bunkerized. Just about every citizen has a way of getting underground. I've been in D.C. several times in the last couple of months, and I have been amazed at the labyrinth of very effective underground facilities that they have in Washington, D.C. Now, I have to wonder, why would they build all these things? Well, the truth actually might be told in a small commission that met 2 weeks ago this last Wednesday for the third time in less than a year and a half. And this commission is assigned directly from the top to figure out a way to either push an asteroid out of the way or blow it up. They have a $48 million a year budget. They met in Pasadena 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, and they are actively putting together a mission to go up and push an asteroid out of the way with 2 satellites, two spaceships. One is going to attach itself to the asteroid, and the other is going to stand back and watch and measure. Now, they're going to practice on this asteroid. It's not something that's threatening to us. They're just going to go on and practice on it. But November 9th of this year, MU-55 passes within less than 1 lunar distance of Earth.
Let me interject something right there. November 9th, the FCC is taking over all airwaves, radio, and television as a quote-unquote test.
That's right. The EAS is going to have its first national test. Now, the EAS has been around for a few years. It replaced the emergency broadcasting system. Most of us have heard that irritating tone on our car radios or seen it at the bottom of the television. But this EAS system will take over all airwaves, radio, satellite TV, regular TV. The only thing it won't take over is the internet and cell phones. And it will broadcast one unified message. Now, it's said that that message is going to come from the president. It may be live, it may be pre-recorded. But the coincidence is too hard to ignore that November 9th, MU-55, and by the way, this is a really strange approach because MU-55 is a kilometer-sized asteroid. It would never burn up in our atmosphere. Of course, the odds of it hitting us are pretty light, too, but it's passing within less than 1 lunar distance, about 100,000 miles from Earth. However, it's not passing between the Moon and Earth. At that time, the arrangement will be that the Moon and the Earth will be parallel to MU-55's course. It will first pass by the Moon, and then it will pass by the Earth. And there is enough error in the calculation, that is to say statistical variation, that we're not exactly sure what the effect of MU-55 is going to be on the Earth. Somebody may know something we don't know. MU-55 may have some luggage. It may have some travelers coming with it. Maybe smaller than MU-55, maybe being dragged along by MU-55, small enough that they could be attracted by Earth's gravity and Moon's gravity, small enough they could be driven by a strong solar wind, which, as you well know, the sun has massive sunspot 1032 on it right now, which, like a double-barreled shotgun, is just about ready to aim straight at Earth in about a day and a half.
I thought today we had some major solar flares.
Absolutely. We've had them for the last 5 days. 1032 has been blasting out X-class flares. Fortunately, they've been missing us. We had a very close call yesterday. England got a very bright sky over it. But if it turns straight at us and we get an X9 flare out of this thing and it hits the grid, that's the electrical grid.
Yeah.
It could melt the core of these giant transformers that step down the transmissions from the big power lines to the power lines that go down your street and go into your transformers. There was an event like this in 1859 called the Carrington event. Now, in those days, all we had was telegraph up on the lines. So it set a few fires and electrocuted a few people and knocked communications out for a few hours. But today, we don't have a couple 100 volts on the line. We have a couple 100,000 volts on the line. If we have a Carrington event today, we'll be without electricity for about 5 to 6 years.
Wow. I think I know what message they're gonna project on November 9th. They're going to say, all of these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landing there.
That's excellent.
But could they be gearing up for Apophis? Because Apophis is supposed to hit in 2036, if it hits the keyhole.
Well, I think that each one of these things, statistically speaking, is a mutually exclusive event. The sun's solar cycle is certainly gearing up to meet all expectations. We've got a couple of good satellites up there. SOHO's been up there for a while, but it's a different kind of satellite. It only looks at the corona. The SDO is a truly magnificent satellite. If they give us all the data that the SDO is putting out, we're going to learn a lot about the sun in the next 4 to 5 years. A lot about the sun. But it's also frightening because the sunspots that are coming up on the sun now, these high-latitude reverse polarity sunspots that are 3, 4, 5 times the diameter of the Earth, they're powerful enough to launch a CME, both particles and frequencies. Most of these are beta, gamma, delta sunspots. So they're very powerful. They pack a broad set of frequencies of high amplitude that, if they're picked up by these transformers, they'll be amplified to millions of volts. So I think that they're gearing up for some event that is literally going to turn us back to where we're rubbing two sticks together to make fire.
You know, I never thought about it from a solar flare perspective, but you're absolutely right, because it's all we need to knock out all the satellites, and that's it. Forget it. It's done.
Well, it's not just the satellites. I mean, sure, we're an electronic age. We rely on GPS and cell phones and satellite TV. It's electricity. And you know what the number one cause of disease is, Chris?
Cancer. Radiation.
It's lack of refrigeration.
Ah.
You lose the electricity, you lose the ability to keep things cold, people will die by the hundreds of millions.
I never thought about that. Very interesting indeed. Wow. So what is this? NASA says NASA scientists brace for solar tsunami to hit Earth. That's what Chris Bogner just sent over. So
yes.
What's best case scenario that we can expect from this tsunami, the solar tsunami?
Well, the best case scenario is that we get a glancing blow, or that it comes in low frequencies and it gives us a little light show and we don't really get any geomagnetic activity out of it. The worst case could be that it's very high frequency, well above the UV range into the X-ray band, that it comes in not a few hundred electron volts, but a few tera electron volts. Those jump onto the power lines, which are all aluminum anyway, and get amplified by these transformers, and we lose the core of these transformers. There are no spares to these transformers anywhere in the world. When those transformers go out, we lose the electricity that comes over those high transmission lines. We lose the electricity. The plants that make the transformers are out of business. It could take a while before we recover from it.
Wow.
I think that the underground bases are there, not so much to protect themselves against, something like the knowing, where you've got a solar conflagration, although we talk about that in our first book. They're there more to protect themselves against the aftermath, when we start eating our young, as we take our cities apart, as we've seen in Greece, in London, in Paris, in Louisiana. When things get bad and law enforcement can't keep up with the unruly will rise up against those who have, and they'll take everything.
I've got to ask you about Tyche for a second, because that came out about the same time as the Elenin story did, and I think that's what caused people to go, wait a minute, Elenin is probably a brown dwarf coming this way, because, they throw a lot of misinformation out there with the good information. Is there any evidence whatsoever of a brown dwarf coming this way, besides Tyche, which is supposedly millions of light years away?
No. When Elenin first popped into existence, and you got to understand how these things are found, amateurs and what we call semi-pros at this business have access to a non-governmental telescope with a digital camera hooked to it. What they do is they aim at the same target spot in space night after night. They take long exposure photographs with a super cooled camera, and you can buy these things for less than $10,000 now, and there are lots and lots of amateurs around the world that do this. They measure the same spot in the sky over and over and over again, taking hundreds of overlaid pictures every single night, and they look for movement. They look for things that don't belong, and that's how these comets show up. When Elenin showed up, it was a big surprise, because normally comets come out of the Oort cloud. We're used to it. We see them all the time. They come in, they get in within range of the sun, they start off-gassing, sometimes the heads come apart, Jupiter scoops them up, and that's the end of the story. But this comet came out of a different spot. It didn't come out of the same neighborhood. It came a very acute angle to the solar plane. It also didn't have a tail on it. So when we looked at it, we saw a very strange structure to it. It just didn't look like a comet. It didn't come from a source of a comet. So we've watched it very, very closely. And I got to tell you, the amount of evidence the amount of observations put out by the JPL have been very, very few, which even fueled more of the conspiracy theorists. However, two things we watched for very closely. One, we knew it was going to pass by some small asteroids. So we tracked the path of the asteroids meticulously. And guess what? It went right by, and the asteroids didn't even wiggle. So we knew it was a very low mass body. The second thing that it did is when it got within range of the sun, it started off-gassing. And a few days ago, the head fell apart, and Elenin is no more than a fart in a whirlwind out there 22 million miles away from us. It's harmless. But the system by which we were alerted is important, and we shouldn't lose sight of that.
What about the idea that it's made out of hydrogen cyanide, and that there's a possibility that in the next couple of days it could actually blow up to the size of the sun?
Well, it's possible, but hydrogen cyanide is, although it's toxic, it's not really energetic. It only has one electron. It's just not that energetic.
Explosive.
It's hard to charge it up. Yeah, it can get explosive if it is coupled with oxygen. But if it's not coupled with oxygen, it's not going to oxidize. It's just going to sit there. It's said that the Great Chicago Fire was caused by the tail of Halley's Comet. As we passed through it, it was a huge, thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of methane that came into our upper atmosphere right over the Midwest. As it got close into the troposphere where we live, it began to experience static charges with our upper atmosphere, and it ignited. And literally the fire descended upon Chicago out of the sky and burned buildings made of steel and concrete to the ground in 10 minutes flat. People ran out of the city in a panic, and they found groups of people killed, no burns on their bodies. The coins fused together in their pockets because the lightning arcs were so violent and so frequent that they were electrocuted outside the city.
Oh, wow.
That fire set 5 states on fire at the same time and burned full-growth trees to the ground, to the nubs, in a few minutes. It was an amazing fire.
Well, we recently had the fires over in Austin. Do you think something like that could have happened to cause those? I've heard theories that objects were actually falling from the sky that ignited those flames.
Yeah, and there's sound fact behind those theories. We have seen a lot of meteorites come in, and some of them, come in fast enough they come in hot. The reason Texas is on fire is because we're undergoing climate change. We, for the last 10 years, have had a climate shift in the northern hemisphere. There's no denying it. There's no way you can slant the facts to say we're not experiencing climate change. I recently flew from Phoenix to Portland, which I do quite often, and this is the first time in my entire life that I've seen it green. It's the first time that there's been a spring in the Middle East, an Arab Spring. There's not since the Sahara was tropical has there been an Arab Spring. Every mountain was covered with snow. Every lake was full of water. And in a couple of weeks, it's going to snow on the Wasatch Front on top of snow that didn't melt from last year. That hasn't happened in 200,000 years. So,
well, I've got to ask you, these earth changes, I can tell that it's getting a lot hotter than normal. Is it also going to get colder than normal as well during the cold months?
Yes, absolutely. Climate change, what we're seeing now, what they're reporting is, the average frequency hasn't changed since 1998. True. But the swings between extreme cold and extreme heat are getting wider and wider and wider. And no, the Earth is not tilted on its axis. This is a direct result of where we are in the galaxy. We arrive here every 26,000 years, and every 26,000 years, years, the solar system is bathed in new frequencies, higher energetic frequencies that definitely have an effect on the magnetics of the Earth, on the behavior of the sun, and on the relationship of the Earth to the sun. And that's what causes these climate change effects.
How are the other planets reacting in the same manner?
Yes, they all react the same way. In fact, Saturn's atmospheric pressure has gone up 30% in the last 19 years.
Those darn Saturnians with their SUVs. I can't believe they would do that.
Yeah, I know. Now, that does bring up a good question, though, Chris. Does man's activities exacerbate the effects and the severity of climate change? And I got to tell you, the jury's still out. A volcano, a single volcanic eruption, takes care of about 25 years of all of our activities on the Earth. In North America, we're pretty careful with the burning of coal. We have infrared monitoring devices on all the stacks. I know this because I ran one of these facilities. And we strive to achieve complete combustion of the carbon. So we strive for CO2. That's the goal. Very little nitrous oxides, very little hydrocarbons. We try not to let the stack temperature drop below 375 degrees Fahrenheit, because when we do, sulfuric acid forms in the stack. We filter out all the particulates. You don't see black smoke coming from coal-fired plants in this country. That stuff is filtered with bags, with electrostatic wires, with tall cooling towers. We just don't have the level of pollution that we once did. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I remember in high school having smog alerts where we could not go out and run. We couldn't go out and play baseball because the air was so filthy with smog. Well, here we are, 30-something years later, and there are a lot more cars in Los Angeles. But I can go outside in the afternoon and I can exercise. Why? Because they put catalytic converters on cars. Because they improve the fuel management systems in cars. Because the requirements to burn fuel more cleanly have been made so stringent that it is actually cleaning up the atmosphere. And China is the same way. I've been there many times. Shanghai, the first time I went there, was a filthy, polluted mess. The last time I went there, the effects are still there. The glass is still etched from acid rain. But all those coal-fired plants, they're closed. They're running nuclear now. It's clean.
You know, Cherie just sent me some interesting information. Cherie, why don't you read that for the audience?
Well, I was just going to mention the fact that all the world leaders are in recess. The UN has an empty schedule from September 23rd through October 10th. The UK Parliament's in recess from September 15th through October 10th. The U.S. Congress is on vacation from September 25th through October 2nd. Germany's president's schedule is empty after September 25th. And Obama's schedule is now
completely empty. And he's here in Denver too, right next to the bunkers.
Apparently, he went home tonight, but I don't know.
He wasn't in the bunker. He was speaking in Denver every single day. Also, don't forget Chinese's national holiday starts next week, so they're taking a national break as well. And if you go back to last year's calendar at this time, they were taking a break.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, we have to look at it from all perspectives. Absolutely. Well, so much interesting information. I mean, there's just so much of it to go through.
I have another
and
thing
misinformation as well. Go ahead.
To bring up. Yeah. Do you know what noctilucent clouds are?
Yes, I do. These are very high-altitude clouds. They're usually caused by cosmic rays. Energy comes in from the sun, or, as we've seen, energy from other sources, and it's in the other category. We're not really sure what the source of the energy is. But this energy comes into our upper atmosphere. It's somewhat polarized by our magnetosphere, but then it strikes the particles, the ions, especially ozone and things like that in our upper atmosphere, and it has a reaction and sputters off. Sputtering is a quantum physics term. It means that these high-energy electrons come in, hit electrons that are floating along in our atmosphere, eating cookies and drinking milk, minding their own business. They get struck by these high-energy particles. They're bumped up to a high-energy state, and then when they fall, they issue a photon. Well, that photon is what we call cosmic rays, and it spawns particles that are hygroscopic, that draw moisture in, even at very high altitudes, like 50, 60,000 feet. And these high-altitude clouds can be luminescent. They can actually become phosphorescent with not only the green glow that's way, way above them up in the ionosphere, but in reflected sunlight that comes around the curvature of the Earth. And they look kind of blue in color. And this is way after sunset. I mean, the sun's gone. It's way over the curvature of the Earth. And yet these clouds will sit up there and glow.
Is it true that they are largely made of hydrogen cyanide?
No, that's not true. Mostly they're made of water vapor. They're not made of hydrogen cyanide. In fact, it's pretty hard for nitrogen to get up to become energized that way and bond up with carbon. Cyanide is a CN- compound. Hydrogen likes to link to it because it has that extra negative electron sitting on it, but these particles are way far apart when they're up at that high altitude, so they don't react very well with one another. So it's difficult for them to come together in that form. Hydrogen cyanide is difficult to make. It's usually found under high pressure.
Well, I was just thinking, with the recent gaps in the magnetosphere, couldn't these clouds kind of get stirred up more?
Well, the magnetosphere is way out there, and it doesn't really get breaks in it. The flux lines by physical law are unbroken. We are seeing anomalies in our gravitational field, not our magnetosphere. We are seeing kind of amoebic movement in that. The upper atmosphere, even above the troposphere, is still well inside the magnetosphere. So I doubt that that's happening. However, you bring up a good point, because we do have some instruments on Earth that are responsible for heating that up, and they are responsible for pouring a lot of energy into that layer, and it's called HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project on the North Slope of Alaska. This is a 1 billion-watt ionospheric heater, and it definitely has been pouring a lot of energy into the upper atmosphere. We're not the only ones that have an instrument like that.
Well, we came across some charts, and I don't know if I'm reading these correct, but it seems to appear that the magnetosphere is actually flipping. The magnetic poles are flipping for about 45-minute intervals, and it seems to happen on a daily basis, if not several times a day. Have you come across any information like this?
A little bit. It's not the magnetosphere. It's actually the polar alignment, the magnetic poles of the Earth. I have a little stake in this because my great-great-grandfather is the one that actually discovered the North Magnetic Pole, Sir James Ross.
Congratulations.
It's kind of been in the same place ever since he found it in 1831, except that we've noticed that it's been moving at the rate of about 25 miles per year toward Russia. In fact, it's moved so much that several airports on the southeastern seaboard have had to sandblast the compass readings off their runways and paint new numbers on it because the compasses have changed. Now, this is an effect we call the Coriolis effect. It was actually theorized by Isaac Newton. He said that in any rotating coordinate system, like a rotating planet, there will be a force at a right angle to that rotating set of coordinates called the Coriolis effect. If the energy of the rotating field becomes unstable, like a top slowing down or two bodies counter-rotating against one another, then that force will manifest itself in that pole beginning to move toward the equator. And I got to tell you, Chris, 25 miles is across town. We're not talking a few yards a year. We're talking across town every year, heading toward Russia. You know, in 5 years, that's 125 miles. And the thing about the Coriolis effect is it's believed that it's a logarithmic movement. That is to say, it might be 25 miles this year, and 35 miles next year.
And 50 or 100 miles next year. Yeah.
Exactly, because the exponent is a power of 10, just like earthquakes. And the film that Brent Miller and I put out, I think it was in 2008, it was called The Horizon Project. We studied this from several different angles, and we theorized, and I think rightly so, that a pole shift, that is to say north and south poles swapping, could take place in a matter of months or perhaps years, but I don't think it takes 10,000 years. I think this is something that occurs very quickly. Look at the sun. It does it every 22 years, or every 11 years.
I'm a bit confused. Are you talking about a physical pole shift?
Yeah, I'm talking about the north. Now, not the continents moving around. I don't mean that Sweden is going to move down around where Terra Firma is. I'm saying that the magnetic poles will shift.
I got you.
This will be profound in the sense that all the migratory patterns will shift. The way the ocean currents move will shift. The way the jet stream moves will shift. And places that are deserts might become lush and green, and places that are rainforests might become deserts.
Well,
it's going to take some adjusting.
I've read that some of the native people in like the Arctic and places like that are saying that they're having a hard time navigating because the stars seem to have shifted. Have you heard anything of that nature? And if that's the case, what could be causing that other than some kind of actual shift of the Earth?
Well, nothing could cause it other than an actual shift of the Earth. I would be surprised to see that, because there are geosynchronous telescopes that on a nightly, and some of them even during the day, lock in on stars, and that's the way they lock in. I have a Sky Scout, which is a handheld observatory, and you put it on a star, push the button, and it tells you what star that you're looking at, what planet you're looking at, and it's dead on the money. So, and it's driven by GPS. So, I don't think the Earth is shifted on its axis. I wouldn't be surprised if they're having a hard time navigating from the stars, though. That's pretty common. Ships have been running aground for millennia because of making mistakes looking at the stars.
Well, what can we expect for the next... Well, I guess let me ask you this question first, a question from the chat. How's the North Pole expedition coming along? And with the climate changes and Earth changes, do you think it'll be easier if the Earth is heating up or during the hotter months to access that area?
That's a good question. You know, in 2007, that area broke open for the first time, well, you know, since man's kept records. Could be hundreds of thousands of years, we don't know. And so this portion of the ocean actually opened up so that it could be sailed. However, no one sailed it. It hasn't been sailed yet because it's way off the shipping lanes. It takes a heck of a ship to get up there. That being said, we have two challenges. One, that these are deep in Russian waters, so we have to use a Russian ship to get there. The Russians in 2008 had 3 ships that could make this trip. Now they have 2. One is being salvaged, or should I say, turned into scrap iron. The 2 ships will be retired at the winter of 2012. So there'll be no ships in 2013 that are capable of making this expedition. We do have 2 investors that are interested in the business plan that we put together. They're interested in the screenplay. You have to write a screenplay when you're going to do a documentary. We have a science team together from MIT, Harvard, Washington University, and Stanford universities. We have esoteric groups together, like exopolitics, and we have UFO experts, and we have people that are experts in consciousness so that we can take advantage of being sequestered away from society for 15 days. And of course, we got expert film crews that are going to capture this whole thing on about 3,000 to 4,000 hours of film in 15 days. And the hard part has been moving the money from where it is in these banks, and they're American banks, by the way, into the project. Because this is a $2 million expedition. That's just to charter the boat and get people there and back. That doesn't count the post-production cost. That's just the cost of the expedition. And the banks have refused to release the money. because their stocks are so delicate in the stock market that if they release that money, cash going out their door, their stock price goes down. And it's been a real battle for about 3 months. We have not been able to get this money out of the bank and to Russia. It's just a difficult project.
I've got to ask you about the chemtrails real quick. According to the patent of the aerosol sprayers, it's to block out radiation from the sun. So could these chemtrails actually be something benevolent, where they're trying to block out the solar flares or any radiation that comes from the sun?
And they consider our health just to be collateral damage?
Well, can I put a little aside in here, because I got a bone to pick with the EPA over this.
Okay.
Everybody does. Please, please.
The Environmental Protection Agency, about 6 years ago, started using court precedents in a very, very careful and engineered way to fortify their ability to write regulations. Unknown to the general public, the Congress does not write the rules for the EPA. The EPA writes its own rules. Congress tries to keep up with them, but the EPA has so many people on staff, and they have so many lawsuits, thousands of lawsuits going every single day. And as they win them, in careful succession, they build precedents to be able to write these rules. One of the rules that they wrote eliminates CFCs. Now, this goes back a couple of heads of the EPA to Christine Todd Whitman, but one of the things that CFCs is used for is a propellant. Used to be that they just went after the Freon and air conditioning. Well, that's okay. I mean, now we have air conditioning systems that work almost as good as the old systems. But now they've gone after medical devices. And if you're an asthmatic and you have an inhaler, you're out of luck, because they have now outlawed the asthma inhaler that people have been using for 40 years, and they've replaced it with the HFA, which is a hydrofluoroalkane compound, which is actually toxic, and they lace it with alcohol, which can actually constrict your bronchial tubes instead of open them up. Anybody that's ever taken a shot of Everclear and tried to breathe after it knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I was an asthmatic from the time I was 5 years old to the time I was 52. And I lived with one of those things in my pocket.
I do too. And it made me so mad whenever I went in to get my Ventolin inhaler, and turns out I have to pay $50 now for a little tiny inhaler that makes me feel like crap every time I use it.
Yeah, and it won't last but about a week or 10 days, and the other ones used to last about a month.
Yes.
What do you do? What do you do for chest tightness?
What do? I don't do anything now, but in those days, if I didn't have my asthma inhaler, I pretty much was out of luck. I had to sit on the sidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You feel like a fish out of water.
You feel like somebody trying to climb a set of stairs while breathing through a drinking straw.
Yeah. That is what it feels like.
That's what my whole life feels like. No,
really?
I'm just kidding. Too many cigarettes.
Anyway, so we have a concern over the ozone layer. Ozone is O3. It's 3 oxygen atoms tied together into one free radical molecule called ozone. It exists happily up around 50, 60,000 feet, a little higher, actually 80,000 feet in the atmosphere, and it sits there and waits for shortwave ultraviolet radiation to come into the upper atmosphere. The ultraviolet radiation sputters off that extra electron, and the compound absorbs that UV energy, and a longer wavelength photon is emitted. So thus it protects the surface of the Earth against this shortwave radiation, which is germicidal. I mean, it dimerizes DNA. It kills stuff. It sterilizes stuff. We don't want that radiation striking the planet, because we'd have to go outside with long sleeve shirts and sunglasses, and it would probably wipe out all the good, friendly bacteria that's on everything, helping the world decay and going through its life cycle. Earth would be exterminated just like Mars is exterminated. It has no ozone layer at all. So protecting it is certainly a good idea. However, the EPA stating that CFCs were responsible for the hole in the ozone layer was absolute 100% total junk science. There was no proof whatsoever. And yet they won the court case, and it gave them the precedent to go after everything. And they're very careful about who they sue. They come in with full guns, they fine you into poverty, and then they win the court case. And when they win it, they build their rules upon that win. And Congress right now, and I just came from there 2 weeks ago, I sat down with 14 Congress people, including Nancy Pelosi, and they are furious with the EPA and also powerless to do anything about it.
Wow. Wow. And then meanwhile they say the air is safe to breathe after 9/11. You know, I mean, it's...
You know, that's the one thing that really aggravates me the most is I've said this before on the broadcast, but they can poison the food and I can go by natural. They can poison the water and I can filter it through my Berkey. When they poison the air, there's nothing anybody can do about it, unless we want to walk around with gas masks on the whole time, but that's a little bit silly.
Well, here's where they're asleep at the wheel. I mean, absent. They're AWOL. They're not paying any attention at all, and the entire human race is being adversely affected, and their lives are being shortened every second of every day since Fukushima. This low-grade radiation that's being leaked into the atmosphere by Fukushima is far more damaging to the longevity of the human race than every nuclear explosion, and I'm talking over 1,200 nuclear bombs that have been set off on this planet in the modern day. More damaging than all of those nuclear explosions combined. And they're doing nothing to stop it.
Well, I've got to ask you in the last few minutes that we have your take on the Colorado and Virginia earthquakes. There are reports, Ben Fulford, other sources as well, saying that they actually nuked the underground bunkers. Have you heard anything to that effect, and how do you feel about it? Do you think there's validity to that?
You know, I think there's validity to it because I know what happened at Fukushima. I know there were nuclear devices detonated at Fukushima to destroy those reactors. I saw the explosions on TV myself. I watched the replay of the clouds. I compared it against known nuclear devices that are made in Dimona, Israel, and they're identical. They're identical in size, they're identical in shape, and the systems that were put in place at that reactor are the same size and the same dimensions as the devices that they set off in the deserts in Israel for a test. So I know that facility was nuked. I also know that tsunami was induced somehow by something out in the ocean, maybe underwater nukes, because I saw the films and I saw the photographs of Fukushima before the tsunami hit, and there wasn't so much as a broken piece of glass. There wasn't a car out of line. Even the statues in the park were still standing up. There's no way that area was hit by a 9.8 or 9.1, maybe a 5.6. I've been through one myself. I know what it feels like. It's a little disconcerting, but those people are used to earthquakes that size. That tsunami wasn't caused by that quake. I was in the Pentagon an hour before that quake hit. I went out, I got on the train, I went back to the hotel, I took my tie off, and the quake hit. They emptied the Pentagon because, I don't know if you've ever been to the building, but only the outside ring has windows. The inside rings can't see out. All you see is the courtyard in between the rings.
Right.
So when they felt it shake, and there's never, ever been a quake like that in Virginia, they actually thought they were being attacked again. Alarms went off, a water main in the inside ring, the A ring broke, flooded a hallway. They evacuated the place. They panicked. The whole city panicked. The whole place shut down. There were police, helicopters, everybody was out in the streets, ambulances everywhere, cops everywhere. Now, that being said, there wasn't a lot of loss of life and there was very little property damage. But that quake was a wake-up call for that city. So, how did that quake happen? I don't know. But I wouldn't put anything past these people now.
Yeah, we couldn't find any active fault lines or anything around any of the epicenters of these quakes.
We felt the one.
We felt it. We're a couple of miles away from Lockheed. The first thing that I thought was, oh, they must have blew something up underground over there, because it was a very light shake. And then we found out that this actually took place 180 miles south of where we are. But still, that was my first intuition, was they must have blown something up underground.
Well, it occurred about 30 miles from where I was, and I knew it because I was, a California boy, so I know exactly what it feels like. But those Virginians had no idea what was going on.
Did you see the pictures that the West Coast guys were putting out with overturned lawn chairs saying, "We will never forget"?
That's hilarious. That's really good. I like it.
Absolutely. Where can people catch your radio show and your websites and anything that you're working on?
Well, sure. X Squared Radio is every Sunday evening from 8 to 11 Eastern Time at xsquaredradio.com. It's live for 3 hours, free. You can listen to it free. Archives are a couple bucks a month for a year. It's really inexpensive. The books, I have 4 books out at archivemillionsofyears.com, which make up 2,000 pages on 2012 and the origin and destiny of the Earth. It is used as a textbook in many universities. It's been quoted by more 2012 books than I could name. A tremendous amount of research, almost 30 years of research by my co-author, 10 years of research by myself. It is a combination of archaeology and physics tied into a very, very detailed and readable explanation of what the ancients saw from a physics point of view and what it means for us today. That's at archivemillionsofyears.com. And then my latest book is called Remembering the Future, The Physics of the Soul and Time Travel. And it is really a self-help book to teach you how to bring wealth and success into your life using the principles of physics and mathematics. And it's readable, it's fun, there's some good stories in it, and time travel, even makes it more interesting.
I don't know which one my favorite one is. I remember hearing you first on Coast to Coast, and you were talking about the Arc of Millions of Years, so I checked that out, and that was mind-blowing. And then the other one comes out. So we're waiting for the third one.
Well, I am working on another book. I'm not going to tell you what the title is, but all my books are nonfiction. I have enough time to write fiction. I wrote fiction for years in college, and I wrote almost 10,000 technical papers. So these books are nonfiction because I think it's time for people to have tools in their hands to know how to take control of their lives, realize that they should never hand their sovereignty over to another human being. They are sovereign beings, totally involved in the creation of the universe, and they should do it on purpose.
I completely agree. We have talked about that time and time and time again. Brooks, we really appreciate your time tonight, especially because you were exhausted and you still came on the broadcast, so many thanks. It's always a pleasure having you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love coming on. Your radio program, Truth Frequency, is exactly that. It just resonates with me. I know it resonates with your listeners because they write me mail after I'm on your program, and they say how great we are together.
Excellent, excellent.
Chris and Melanie. Is it Melanie?
Cherie.
Cherie, gee. Well, see, your name's not up there. I see Chris's name up there.
Aw, nah.
You're actually the brains behind the operation, though. Everyone knows that.
She's the left brain. She is the left brain.
I take care of the left brain. He's the right brain.
I take care of the graphics and the audio and everything. She does all the research.
See, I'm tripolar, so I can do it all, and it's just how it all falls together.
Excellent, Brooks. We appreciate it. You have a great evening.
All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Brooks Agnew. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with John Lamb Lash. And co-hosting the broadcast with us will be Christopher Everard riding shotgun. We'll see you in just a few minutes.
Hello, friends. I am the Anti-Terrorist, and you're listening to Truth Frequency.
They want to externally manipulate the body computer so it doesn't pick up these truth vibrations, these higher levels of awareness that are coming in so fast now.
It's all visible, like mind control techniques employed in the mainstream media.
And by perpetuating that fear and maintaining that throughout every level of society,
it becomes really difficult to actually break through to people, to actually get them to see that they can find this love and this higher consciousness within themselves.
And this often helps a lot because some of the most elusive mysteries you're not able to apprehend them directly. You can only apprehend them by negation as to finding out what they're not.
The veil is lifted and we can see things as they are. And ultimately, we have control over that.
And here we are, ladies and gentlemen, once again tapped into the truth frequency. This is your host, Chris Geo. Joining me, as always, is my lovely chipmunk twin flame and co-host, Cherie.
Hey, everybody.
And it is September 27th, 2011. Special thanks to Brooks Agnew, who joined us in the first hour, in the first half hour, actually. We were joined by Christopher Bogner, good friend of mine, OBGYN. Very insightful information on consciousness and the whole DNA structure. We're going to have Chris back on. There's a lot of Chris's. There's Chris Bogner, there's Chris Cowan, there's Christopher Everard, there's Chris Geo. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to keep up with all of them, too.
It is a good name. It is a good name.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm absolutely fine, apart from it being 6 o'clock in the morning. But, that's okay.
Is it 6 o'clock? Oh, my God. Did you get a little bit of sleep, at least?
Yeah, I did. I'm just kidding. No, I get up early anyway, and, yeah, it's good to be with you. Is it okay? I've got a couple of little things to say about what Brooks was saying about Fukushima.
Absolutely.
There's an official earthquake monitoring and tremor monitoring site run by the Japanese government, and you can see that, I know it sounds like a terrible thing to say this, but it's true. Off of the Never Eat Shredded Wheat, off of the northeast coast of Japan, you have a kind of mini continental shelf under the ocean, and there's tremors going off all the time. I think that there's been at least 150 or 250 events that have been monitored since the quake and the tsunami. And Japan is one of these places that gets hit by typhoons. There's been 2 typhoons since Fukushima. People have been killed by these typhoons, but you know, the mainstream media haven't really covered those typhoons at all for some reason. And there are earthquakes in Japan. So
there are. Yes, it's happening very frequently.
Yeah, there's a lot of people saying, you know, that they use nukes. I mean, I do agree that if you put a nuke on a fault line like the San Andreas fault, it's going to potentially set off a series of vibrations which are going to potentially move one of the tectonic plates. That is a possibility. But
we made a prediction. We made a prediction a few months ago. I think it was last March or something like that, where we predicted that something will happen to the San Andreas fault line in this winter, in the months of October, November, sometime around then. Maybe that's a possibility because we have Diablo Canyon right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the tectonic plates, they rest upon each other, and you know, they're moving in opposite directions. So what tends to happen is that stress builds up until it gets to the point where there's enough energy held up, like recoil energy held up, where they're sort of blocking each other from moving in opposite directions, and then all of a sudden it just splits away. I think that the San Andreas fault, last time I read up about it, it's long overdue for a big quake.
It is. Yeah. The New Madrid as well is something that we've been keeping an eye on. We had flooding in Mississippi. I don't know what happened with that, but there's been a complete media blackout on that. And then there was another reactor in Nebraska, I think it was, that was flooded.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, that's right. Yeah. I'm still waiting. This is several months later. I wrote a letter to Greenpeace asking them about mass animal deaths. If you remember the birds falling out of the sky, and other instances of birds, just literally dropping out of the sky. Greenpeace haven't answered me on any of my letters, and I'm pretty disappointed about that. But Brooks said some interesting things there. I don't like actually saying anything in my films or whatever. Like, for example, it was definitely nukes without having some kind of evidence.
I agree.
I mean,
I agree.
We're dealing with a Luciferian-inspired evil hierarchy, and we know that because I've traced the careers of some of the people that are, behind the Pentagon and NATO, and they are members of satanic organizations such as the Corazon Club, and that's for sure. So, we know that there are people like Michael Aquino who are running a satanic agenda, and the main agenda is the utter destruction of humankind and the planet. But to say that it was definitely nukes is it's something that crosses the line as far as I'm concerned. When I research something,
Ladies and gentlemen, John Lamb Lash is joining us. He has been called the true successor of. Actually, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself, John, since we're skipping the break. Take us away on what you do, and then we'll get into the Nag Hammadi text and the Myth of Sophia.
Well, thank you, Chris. Never been asked to introduce myself before. Let's see if I can make up something good here. Well, I'm just a writer, and I've explored mystical matters all my life. Been interested in religion, which I think is a great problem for the human species. But basically, my career path has been in mythology, following the course that was set by the great comparative mythologists, going back to Sir James Frazer, coming ahead to Mircea Eliade and Joseph Campbell. So I'm often referred to in regard to those gentlemen who were really academic masterminds. I'm nothing like that. I don't teach at a university or anything. I'm a freelance scholar, but I have walked the paths they walked, and they've brought me to a certain point, and then I went further than they went. Mm-hmm. And so I feel that the role of mythology today to illuminate our path and to show us who we are and connect us to the divinity of the earth is absolutely imperative. And I'm grateful for those scholars for having put me on that path.
I completely agree. What is planetary tantra, and how can we achieve that state to where there's planetary harmony throughout?
Well, I don't know about harmony. Harmony is something that you say you would have. Maybe you would have harmony in yourself, harmony between yourself and your divine self, or harmony between yourself and the cosmos. That's been a quest of our species for since time beyond reckoning. When it comes to harmony socially and harmony between human beings, that's a much more complicated matter. Of course, some of us would like to have that. Some of us would just like to get along here and have a good time, wouldn't we? Think I could include you in that group?
Yes, we're the kind of people that just want to be left alone by everybody else. We want to get along with everybody, and we're constantly fighting with people that just don't want to leave other people alone, if you know what I mean. And they don't want to live in calmness and serenity. They want that chaos.
Well, this is the reality of the human condition, and we really have to face it. There are some people who don't want us to just get along and enjoy each other and have a good time, and there are people who are motivated by self-hatred and a tremendous hatred of humanity, and this is something that we have to face. But beyond that dilemma, I would say that the best chances for social harmony in the future on this planet would be to have a voluntary consensus, that is to say, not a contrived consensus like we have now in the media and the manipulation of every aspect of human behavior and thinking, but a voluntary consensus as to what the framework of our existence actually is. And this framework was taught in the ancient pagan mystery schools, and it was taught through a narrative, a sacred narrative, or a story, vision story I call it, the story of the Aeon Sophia, which is actually the story of the evolution of our earth and the origin of the human species. So we are storytelling animals, I often say that, and within the framework of a story, we can agree, we can make certain basic agreements that will allow us to have not a perfectly harmonious society, but at least to have an adequately harmonious one, and to understand the premises of our common aid, our common interest, and our common support. And so the Sophia Vision story is a framework for that, and Planetary Tantra is a way to practice that story.
Well, you can look at the yin and yang, and you can see that there's darkness inside of the light, and there's light inside of the darkness. So I think it's all about a balance. And unfortunately, we have to face that grim reality that Earth is balanced with the negative and the positive. But we've become so far out of balance, or so far into the negative, that it's really disillusioning, and it almost seems hopeless. We can look in the mirror all day long and change the person that's inside of us, and it's something that I talk about on the show time and time again, to change that person that's staring in the mirror. If we all took that responsibility, the whole world would change. But then we run into the negative, and the negative brings us down. Is there anything that you've learned in your time to help you stay out of that negative when the negative just surrounds you?
Yeah. I stay in beauty. Beauty is the answer. I live in beauty. And the beauty of the earth, the beauty of this earth, is absolutely awesome. And whenever I connect with that beauty, first of all, through my body, through the beauty of being alive, the beauty of the precious moment of life, which is a blink of an eye, and in the sense of beauty and transience, I stay centered in that balance. And then in that balance, when I'm centered, then I can deal with the negative that's thrown at me from whatever angle.
I couldn't agree with you more. We moved out to the Rocky Mountains here, and when things start to overbear us, we go to the mountains and look at the wildlife and look at the beauty of the land. I completely agree with you. Getting in touch. There's even a little prairie dog field here where we'll go and just sit there and watch the prairie dogs. You have to get back in touch with nature. We have to realize that we are nature. It's not something that we have to get back in touch with. It's something that we have to realize that we're a part of. It's all one entity, one organism working together. But there was, we were at in the mountains the other day, and we were watching this baby deer, and the mother was teaching it how to search for food, and it was right next to the road, and we stopped, and we're watching this pretty beautiful little baby deer. And
this beautiful interaction going on.
Yes, and then this pickup truck comes flying down the street. This woman is on her cell phone, and the baby deer, the mother knew what to do. The mother went to the opposite side. She didn't go into the road. She went into the forest. The baby deer ran into the road, and it was only, it had to be some kind of divine intervention, but this thing, it looked like the truck passed right through this baby deer, but it missed it by an inch, and it was able to get away. But then it was even in the mountains, in the place where we escaped, we still see the negativity and the selfishness, and it was really sickening.
Well, if that had been France, they would have shot the deer through the head, taken it home, and turned it into sausages in a garage.
That's terrible.
Which is a speciality with French people.
That is terrible. I couldn't do that.
I couldn't do that either.
No. I can eat meat from the grocery store. I can't ever hunt my own, though. If it came down to that, I'd be a vegetarian.
Yeah, the French speciality is taking pigs, shooting them through the head in a garage, and turning them into sausages. That's what they do.
Wow.
Wow.
Hello, John. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Hello. I don't think Chris introduced me. My name's Chris. I'm co-hosting the show. I've listened to a few of your broadcasts, John. I'm actually here packing my bags. I'm going to go off to Egypt, and I've been researching the Nag Hammadi scrolls myself.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah, and I'm doing an expedition to Egypt with 2 Egyptologists and 2 Coptic Christians. A lot of people think that Egypt is sort of, an Islamic country, but in actual fact, Islam came 7 centuries after Christians actually, were in Egypt. A lot of the temples at Luxor had Christian temples built inside them. And the Nag Hammadi texts are, one of the most fascinating creation myths. They're very, very unique. And I've got a question for you, John, if you don't mind me asking.
No, absolutely.
I've been researching Tiamat, which is, according to the Ordo Templi Orientis and some of the satanic arsehole kind of organizations that have nothing but hatred for humanity and the planet. In actual fact, they consider humanity to be an abomination. These satanic organizations want utter destruction. And I've been listening and researching, various satanic rituals where they're trying to invoke and summon the spirit of Tiamat. And in the Enuma Elish, Tiamat is the serpent snake goddess of chaos. Now I want to ask you, John, do you think that Tiamat in the Babylonian legends is really the same as the Demiurge and Sophia?
Well, the question is a little skewed because the Demiurge and the Sophia are completely different entities.
Well, we should say for the listeners that the Demiurge is the serpent, or the destructive force, would you say?
No, that's not. You mean according to the Gnostic teachings at Nag Hammadi?
Yeah, because in Plato's Republic, isn't the Demiurge described as a serpent?
Well, let's leave Plato out of it for a minute. He was not among the Gnostics, and he was not he didn't go to Egypt and learn from the Egyptian mythology from the Egyptian priest, did he?
Well, there was a handwritten copy of Plato's Republic found amongst the Nag Hammadi codices.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean anything, because the Nag Hammadi codices is a dog's breakfast. It's just an absolute complete mess. It's as if you found notes of a college student that were in the backpack of a college student that had been taken in several different classes over several different generations, jumbled notes. The fact that there is a Platonic fragment of Plato included in here in Coptic does not necessarily associate the teachings of Plato with the true Gnostic message. You see, you have to be really careful in looking into this Nag Hammadi stuff. It takes extreme detective work to sort this out.
Yeah, that's what I specialize in doing. That's what I spend all my time doing. Well, the Demiurge is in Tiamat, and it's also in Plato's Republic as well. The Demiurge is this serpent, snake, force of evil and chaos, is it not?
No, not at all. I mean, are we talking about the Nag Hammadi contents of the Nag Hammadi, what they say about the Demiurge?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we're going to be consistent in drawing from that material, that would not be a correct profile of the Demiurge.
Well, as far as, what I've read, I mean, first of all, John, you said that it's just a collection of like college student notes. Then,
that's right.
What's your opinion of why it was secreted away and stored, especially in earthenware jars and placed in a cave? Why do you think that happened if it's just a load of jumbled notes?
Well, because it is a load of jumbled notes. Imagine that stormtroopers came into a university in England, say, Leeds University. The stormtroopers representing some totalitarian cult came in and destroyed the university and drove the teachers away, shut down all the classes. Imagine that this happened over, say, a period of 50 years. During that time, students in the school would continue to go to classes, but they would be under pressure. They would be living in a situation where the resources of their learning and their education were at risk. The whole faculty itself would be in disorder. They would be trying to get their information out under risk of being persecuted or murdered. I mean, just imagine such a situation. That was the situation in Egypt during the first couple of centuries of the Christian era, when these Christians took over the stormtroops, as they've been called by one historian. The stormtroops of the new Christian religion barged into the Egyptian temples and tore apart the libraries at Dendera, for instance. I personally believe that the Nag Hammadi texts, which were found about 20 miles from Dendera, which was a goddess temple on the river, were actually student notes taken there at the Dendera temple under the dictation of some of the last living masters and Gnostic initiates of the Egyptian schools at that time. And they were, first of all, it's very weird that they were taken down in Coptic. Have you ever heard any scholar of the Nag Hammadi tell you why these materials are in Coptic?
Well, I've read several books. I mean, what's your take on it?
Well, no scholar has even addressed the question of why they would be in Coptic. Because Coptic was a very new language invented for the specific reason, specific purpose of transcribing hieroglyphs into a demotic script.
Yeah,
it was kind of like a stenographic shorthand for translating hieroglyphs. So why, and it's a very awkward language, it has a obscure compounded grammatical structures, it has a great paucity of intellectual and metaphysical refinement. Why on earth would anyone use this language to write down these exalted mystical and cosmological teachings? You see?
Well, you have to admit, John, that a lot of these types of writings throughout history have been written in certain ways to, only be revealed to the initiated. And am I not right in saying that what's on the Rosetta Stone? You've got Greek, you've got hieroglyphs, and you've got Coptic, haven't you?
Coptic on the Rosetta Stone, that's possible. But it wasn't written in Coptic for the initiates. On the contrary. The purpose of Coptic, it was an invention to take the initiated symbolic language of hieroglyphs and make it into a demotic language. So you can't say it was written for the initiates.
No, I'm saying it's written for, like, the exalted sort of secret priesthood.
Not at all. Not at all. It's student notes. It's notes that were taken down in a kind of shorthand language from the oral teachings of the last masters of the mystery schools in Egypt. That's what it is. That's what the Nag Hammadi is. And it's just a mess of disorganized and contradictory material that reflects the fact that this material was transcribed and written down. It was not assimilated or digested in any consistent way, and it represented a final desperate attempt to get certain things down in writing when all the originals, which were in Greek and other Middle Eastern languages, had been destroyed.
But you've got the demiurge, which, as far as what I've read is concerned, Sophia made a creation without the Godhead's permission, which became the demiurge, which is this, as far as I've read, a chaotic serpent force.
No, that's not correct. It's not a serpent force. It's a draconic force. It's a reptilian force. It's not a serpent force.
Okay, well, let's use the word reptilian then. And you've got Plato, who also mentions the demiurge as well.
Yeah, because the demiurge was a teaching in the Greek mystery schools as well, but it was not understood in the same perspective of the Sophianic vision that was preserved in the Egyptian and Syrian and Levantine mystery schools. Plato was an outsider. Plato is not a good reference for understanding the in-depth teachings of the Egyptian Gnostics. Not at all, despite the fact that a fragment of his work was found with these materials.
Yeah, why do you think they did copy Plato if he's got, if according to you it's got nothing to do with it? Why did they bother to copy it?
I'm telling you again, it's like if there was an exploded bus that carried students back and forth from Leeds University, and you found the knapsack in the ruins of this explosion, and in this knapsack you had various notes that the student had taken in various classes. At that time in Egypt, in the first centuries of the Christian era, and preceding that for at least 6 or 8 centuries, going back at least 6 or 8 centuries, it was customary for serious philosophers and students of the cosmos from Greece to go to Egypt and study in the Egyptian schools. You know that, of course.
Yes.
So, they had Plato's work with them, they would have brought Plato's work in Greek. They would have brought copies of Plato's work in Greek from Greece and had it in their notebooks and in their in the materials of study when they were traveling around the various Egyptian schools and learning one thing or another. So it's not at all surprising that you find a document of Plato in there. But if you want to talk about the demiurge, let's talk about the demiurge rigorously in the framework of the Gnostic vision story, because that is what the fantastic advantage of the Nag Hammadi writings. They give us the Gnostic vision story, and they explain who the demiurge is in the context of that story.
Okay, well, my research, what I've read, is that Sophia created a being without permission from the Godhead.
That's not correct. First of all, Sophia is a divine being. She is equal to the Godhead. She is, in fact, the Godhead of this world.
Isn't she the personification of...
right now is Sophia.
Whoa. Okay, let's just...
Well, Chris, hold on. Chris, I think you're speaking over a lot of the audience heads, because I don't think a lot of people understand exactly what the Myth of Sophia is, and I'd like to give John the opportunity to explain everything before.
Yeah, that was what I was just going to do, Chris. I was just going to sort of take things at A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. John, I do agree with Chris, because a lot of people have never read the Nag Hammadi scrolls. Now, we should say that there's... How many actual individual kind of fragments are there, John? I think there's something like 12... there's 10 individual leather-bound books. Is that right?
No, that's not correct. If you will allow me, I would like to do two things. First, I'd like to describe physically what the Nag Hammadi books are, and then I would like to give, in 3 minutes, a synopsis of the Sophia vision story that explains who the demiurge is.
Okay.
How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Take more than 3 minutes, John. Please, the floor is yours. And Chris, let me give the floor to John, and then we'll get into the debate in a minute. Please take it away, John.
I welcome your questions, Chris. It would perhaps be better for readers and for us as well if we lay down the framework for our exchange in this way. So how about that?
Okay. Yeah, I agree, yeah.
So first of all, the Nag Hammadi codices are books. Codex is the Latin word for book. And these are actually the oldest surviving copies of bound books that exist in the world. They're not scrolls. They are actually pieces of parchment that were cut into small rectangles. They're very small. They're sort of like the size of a woman's pocketbook or a little notebook you would slip in your bag. And they are leather-bound, papyrus leaves, numbered pages, with a few exceptions. They are numbered pages, bound books with numbered pages. And there are 13 of them. The 13th one is badly burned. Apparently there were more than 13. Let's say there were maybe 15 or 16 of these leather-bound books. They were found inside a clay jar in a cave in Upper Egypt in December of 1945. And finally they made their way to a collector at the Coptic Museum in Cairo named Togumina, who actually realized, and a French scholar came along, and they finally realized what they were. They're written in the Coptic language, and they contain 52 separate documents, some of which are quite long, running as long as 90 pages, and some of which are extremely short and fragmentary, running to no more than 3 or 4 pages. It's a vast mixture of contradictory material. It does contain an excerpt from Plato's Republic, which is dated 400 BC. The date generally attached to these books that were found in 1945 is around 300 AD. They were written down around 300 AD in the Coptic language, and most scholars assume that they are copies of Greek originals, but no one has ever found the originals. Okay? That's the physical stuff. That's the physical books we're looking at. Now, let me just say for a minute why these books are so tremendously significant, and why and how they are unique. They contain, although in a fragmentary and chaotic form, they contain transcriptions from actual oral teachings that were given in the mystery schools of Egypt and Syria and the Levant. And these teachings reflect some of the most important knowledge transmitted in those schools. And so the Nag Hammadi documents are a unique source of the knowledge of the ancient mystery schools. And there is nothing comparable. I would point out something, and Chris, both of you Chris's would know this. And who else am I speaking to here?
Sherry.
Sherry, hi Sherry. You would probably know this, that the mystery schools were universities of spiritual learning and training, guided by seers and shamans who were highly developed in the arts of heightened awareness, and that you would probably know that what went on in those mystery schools, in the inner precincts, in the classrooms, as it were, was protected by a vow of silence, and was never written down. And so, to find these materials which were an outgrowth of those inner teachings is absolutely remarkable, because these materials give us a glimpse inside the sacred precincts where this mystery knowledge was taught and preserved for many thousands of years until it was wiped out at the rise of Christianity. So that, in a nutshell, is the importance of these materials.
Well, I completely agree with you, John, and this is something that we need to learn, because if that's what they're using, if these are the secret mysteries, then we need to understand those and make these hidden, the occult. Occult just means hidden, and make the occult knowledge known to everybody, because then we'll see a global change. I mean, am I wrong in that thinking?
I don't think you're wrong at all. In fact, as far as I can tell, these the sacred knowledge, the visionary knowledge contained in these writings has a tremendous power to free our species, and to free us not only from the spell of evil and deceit which has fallen upon us, but also to return us to the earth and to return us to our connection to the divine powers at the center of our galaxy.
That's where the balance is off. We actually did a Divine Feminine broadcast last Wednesday, I think it was, and the theme of it was that we are off balance with the masculine and the feminine, and it's turned from the Divine Feminine to feminism, which is the opposite of the Divine Feminine. The Divine Feminine is the nurturer, the carer, the protector, and so on and so forth.
That's correct, and the Nag Hammadi texts contain the evidence, the fragmentary evidence, which I have restored into a coherent narrative of the supreme feminist and eco-feminist myth, which is the myth of our planet itself. The Gnostic seers, Gnostics simply means those who know divine matters. They didn't call themselves Gnostics, by the way. They called themselves Teleste, which means we who are aimed. And that's a very interesting term they applied to themselves. We are telestai. We are those who are aimed. By that teaching, by that designation, they introduced to all of their students the same guiding truth. And that truth was that the human species is a storytelling species. And we need a true story to tell us who we are and to guide our evolution. And that true story is the story of the Aeon Sophia, a goddess from the Pleroma, or the galactic center, who plunged from the galactic center in a reckless act of creativity. And the consequences of this act of creativity impact us today. And when we connect with the goddess and understand her story, we understand our own story. We understand the nature of the divine experiment that she set up for us. And this is what they taught in these Gnostic schools. So this story and this information, it's more than information, I never call it that actually. This sacred instruction has a tremendous ability to get us back on the right track on this planet. Nothing compares to it, as far as I can tell.
Chris, how can any of this be evil. I don't see it. You can look at the swastika and say, well, it's evil because Hitler used it, but if you see it on a Buddhist monk, it means something completely different. So aren't we just kind of debating on terms that essentially have dual meanings?
No. The true meaning of the swastika is that Hitler reversed it. In its original form, it's a symbol that shows harmony within the actual life energies, which we call the chakras. The Nazi swastika is reversed, showing chaos.
Exactly. That's my point.
So
but
it's not the same.
Yeah, but we're taking terms, and one person, or one group of people, I should say, believes the term is one thing, while another group defines it differently. I mean, just take the word liberal for a minute, okay? Liberal comes from the word liberty. It means to be free, but you ask a certain group of people, and liberal means communist.
Yeah, but that's because they've been twisted up with mind control.
Can the same not apply here?
Not really, no. The original swastika design is a symbol of harmony within the life energies of the chakras. And the Bavarian elite took that, reversed it, so that it means chaos and disparity and destruction, and used it on their flags.
So, I wonder if we could put this question of evil in the context of the Gnostic teachings. Maybe that would be instructive. Could we try to do that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Take it away, John, please.
Yeah.
You see, Sophia was a goddess, is a goddess. She was a divine power, and her home base is the center of our galaxy. One of the wonderful things about the Nag Hammadi story of Sophia is that it's a story of something that happened in our galaxy. And it explains the appearance of the planet Earth and the solar system in the spiral arms of the galaxy. It's not a story about the origin of creation beyond all the universes or something like that. It's a very particular story about events in a particular setting. Now, coming down to the subject of evil, this is how Gnostics viewed the problem of evil. First of all, they said, when the divine Sophia plunged from the galactic center, that is to say that rather than remaining at the core of our galaxy, which is a pure hub of plasmic energy, she flashed out, she flared out. There was a power spike from the core due to her intention, which was not in violation of the intention of the Supreme Creator, who was called the Originator in Gnostic teachings. It was just an act of freedom. The gods are free. She was free to take a chance, and she took a chance on an experiment with the human species. And the story tells the fantastic details of how this experiment unfolded, and that it contained a number of unanticipated events. Now, first of all, I just ask you to take a few steps back and take that concept on board. It's so much in contrast to what we are normally taught about God. Yeah. In a Judeo-Christian and Islamic framework, we are taught that God is omniscient, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are taught that God has a plan, and God knows the plan, and God in some mysterious way is carrying out His plan, and He knows the beginning and the middle and the end.
Well, we just take a look at the world around us and we know that's not true.
Right. It's totally against the evidence of human experience, isn't it? Shit happens, man. And shit happens even to the gods. And unanticipated things happen. And one of the most fantastic things, one of the really fantastic and engaging things that people find when they come into the Sophia Vision story is that they get empathically connected to the divine Sophia when they realized that she was not omniscient, and she undertook a wild and passionate experiment with us. And some of the consequences of that experiment she herself could not see. The first consequence of that experiment is the arising of the demiurge. But I would point out that the word demiurgos, which is Greek, does not occur very often in the Nag Hammadi texts. And one thing you have to know about these Nag Hammadi writings, they are in Coptic, but they appear to be translations or transcriptions from Greek. So 1 in every 4 Coptic word is really a Greek word. For instance, the Greek word that describes the reptilian nature of the demiurge is drakon, D-R-A-K-O-N.
Yeah.
Right. And that is actually a Greek word, but it is transcribed into a Coptic word. The Coptic word that is generally used to describe the demiurge is the Lord Archon. Archon. He is the Lord Archon, or chief of the Archons.
Yes.
And he's also given various names, such as Saklas, which means blind, and Yaldabayot, which is a very weird made-up name of Arabic and Syriac. Nobody quite knows what it means, Yaldabayot. And this entity is the chief of a kind of hive population of locust-like cyborg entities, which are called archons. And the myth tells us that when this power surge happened, there was a plume or spike of divine energy from the galactic core that burst out into the galactic limbs, the spiral arms. And it impacted the material in the spiral arms in such a way that it gave rise to this species of archons. And Sophia had not predicted this. So she accidentally, as it were, gave rise to this cyborg species. And over the course of time, this cyborg species formed the solar system. They are the engineers and architects of the solar system under her direction. But they do not inhabit the Earth, and they did not create the Earth. They only created the other planets exclusive of the Earth, such as Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and so forth. This is the Gnostic creation myth. And you probably know this, Chris, if you're researching the Nag Hammadi, that, or if you've read some of the scholars who have written in depth about the archons, such as Gilhus, the Norwegian scholar.
Yeah, and John Turner as well.
Right. You probably know that the Gnostic creation myth teaches that the Earth does not belong to the solar system. It is only captured in it.
Hmm. Did these entities create more than just the solar system? Are they responsible for creating other parts of our spiral arm?
No.
Okay. So it's just the solar system.
Right.
Now, I think we should say, for the benefit of the listeners, John, for a bit of clarity, is that in the collection of texts, they are sort of divided up, and the texts have titles. The one that really fascinates me is the trimorphic protonoia.
Right.
And that's really a fascinating text. I mean, when you read it, it's like a kind of flow of consciousness.
Right.
It's a history, it's a creation myth, it's a legend, it's celestial, it's cosmic, it's mind-blowing. And it makes me wonder, when I read through it, whether... I mean, there's also missing passages, and I've done some reading of other authors' research. They say that the missing 5 lines, which is a repeating motif within the text, some of these authors say that there was never anything in those missing lines. They were deliberately inserted as a kind of cosmic mind pause. So that the actual psychological effect of reading, especially the trimorphic protonoia, it's like reading some super nuclear-powered cosmic text that creates kind of mental gymnastics in your mind, and that effect has been, if you like, punctuated with pauses where there's 5 missing lines of text.
But with all due respect, I have to say that sounds to me like a load of crap. There's something that I want to put out as a caution to everyone who's going to explore the Nag Hammadi text.
Mm-hmm.
In those texts, you're going to find, as I said, and you would agree, Chris, I'm sure, a very chaotic and mixed bag of materials. But you are going to find 4 or 5 of them which are very powerful visionary documents.
Yeah.
The trimorphic protonoia is one. The Sophia of Jesus Christ and the Eugnostus is another one.
Yeah.
And these are very powerful visionary. They are technically what are called visionary recitals.
Yes.
Now, if you were to go back and try to cast back in your mind and try to imagine the circumstances under which this material was written down, this is what I would suggest to you. That in the classes and in the closed classrooms of the mystery schools, which were not closed, by the way, to hide anything from humanity or to pursue an agenda of manipulation against the public at large. No, they were closed in the same way that a botany class at Harvard University is closed, you know? People don't just wander in and out of it randomly because the students are concentrating on learning something and the learning process has to be protected. So imagine yourself in one of these closed cells. You're sitting there on the floor with a tablet to write down things, or you're writing on papyrus leaves, and there is before you an illuminated Gnostic, say a woman, and she is teaching you about what happened in the mind of the divine Sophia when she designed the experiment for the human species.
Mm-hmm.
This is what the trimorphic protonoia is about.
Yeah, yeah. Now, am I right, John, in saying that there is a portion of the text that says that when the demiurge had been created, Sophia, she tried to hide it. Is that true?
Yes, that's right.
So we should say for the listeners that there was this creation, this episode of creation where Sophia had been part and parcel of the creation of this Draconis entity.
Right.
And she attempted to cloak or hide that event from the central Godhead.
No, she didn't try to hide it from the central Godhead because nothing can be hidden from the central Godhead. That's impossible. How could that be done?
What did she try and hide it from, though?
She tried to hide it from the rest of the spiral arm.
Uh-huh.
Because the reason for that was because when this horde of locust-like cyborgs, these Archon ETs, were created by an accident, okay? And when this swarming hive of entities, and there were millions and millions of them, arose, there arose within them a master entity, the reptilian overlord type. Yeah. And this reptilian overlord looked around and took itself to be the creator. It thought that it was the creator of the spiral arms of the galaxy where it found itself.
Uh-huh, yes.
Sophia immediately, you'll find this explicitly described in the Nature of the Archons, which is one of the Nag Hammadi cosmological texts.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hypostasis for the Archons. When Sophia realized that Saklas, or the Lord Archon, the demiurge as he's also been called, was a demented entity who took himself for the god who was creating the material around him, creating the material of the spiral arms, she also recognized another property of this entity, which is a very dangerous characteristic of the Archons. It is explicitly stated also in, I believe, the Apocryphon of John or one of the other cosmological texts, where it says the Archons do not regard the place from which they came. That is to say, they do not regard boundaries.
No.
So her impact in the spiral arm created an upheaval in a certain area, and she realized that would spread. This Archon horde would spread to all of the spiral arm of the galaxy unless she hid it, in quotes. And so she enclosed it and gave it boundaries. And she kept it from perceiving the rest of the spiral arm. And that way, she kept it in a kind of quarantine. She quarantined it. That's what it means by hiding.
And is the quarantined area our solar system?
That's exactly true. Yes.
So we are. I mean, this passage that we read, where the Archon came along and it seems to me like a very kind of cosmic way of writing, that their ego took over. They thought that they were the primary creative source. Is that right?
That's right. The arrogance, and it is called arrogance, of the Lord Archon, the demiurge, is typical of the human ego. And it conceives itself to be far greater than it actually is. Okay. And so there is a lesson here, but it's not merely metaphorical. It's not just a metaphor for the human ego. The Lord Archon does really exist. And this Archon, this species of cyborg entities does actually exist in the solar system.
And bringing it to kind of nuts and bolts day-to-day level, does this mean that people who allow their egos to get ahead of them are possibly being influenced in some way by the existence of these archons in our solar system?
Well, the archons in our solar system is one of the great subjects of the Nag Hammadi writings. In fact, I estimate that at least a fourth, possibly, at least a fifth, possibly a fourth of all the material, when you sift through it, concerns the nature, origin, motives, and effect of these archons, because they deeply impact the divine experiment that Sophia planned for humanity. And certainly we can talk about various ways in which the archons, who are mind parasites, would impact human beings. And you're absolutely right. One of those ways is that they use our ego as a platform, as it were, upon which they can spread their delusional influence.
Yeah, that's right.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a quick break. John Lamb Lash and Christopher Everard riding shotgun with us this evening, and we'll be right back in about 3 minutes. We'll pick it up from there. I have some interesting thoughts on what's been discussed. Very interesting discussion.